Now that we've had a week with the information and the dust has started to settle, I want to talk about the PlayStation 5 Pro. The PlayStation 5 Pro is an expensive console. Let's not make any bones about this, and this is the biggest talking point about the entire thing. We are talking about a console that is £699 here in the UK. It's $699 in the US, $950 in Canada. It's 190 something thousand yen in Japan. This isn't a cheap experience. In fact, it's so expensive, some people have even been comparing it to PC builds that can do more than what the PlayStation 5 Pro can. Now, the reality of the situation is you cannot build a PC for under sort of £1,500 to do what the PS5 Pro can. In terms of the actual hardware within it, it's pretty good value for money, which is almost a blasphemous thing to say with the reaction that we've had to this console over the last week. I'm not going to make any bones about it. A 45% faster GPU, a 26% better CPU, and so on and so forth. These are all improvements that I wanted to see. During that technical presentation from Mark Cerny, I was getting everything I wanted from it. Higher fidelity graphics at higher frame rates is exactly what I've been asking for from this generation. I have the box of the PlayStation 5 that says it can do 4K and 120 frames per second. I've only got 120 frames out of 2 games so far, God of War Ragnarok and Returnal. The rest haven't even got there. So, you know, I will accept just a 4K picture at the 60 frames per second. It's as much as my television can do anyway. The only way I've got higher is through my PSVR 2 headset. So it's not an outlandish asking price for the console. Until you realise that Sony are trying to nickel and dime you at every single turn. The performance for that cost would be fine if, say, you could play your existing games on it, like was mentioned throughout that technical showcase. The entire thing told you that you could play games that you already owned at better fidelity, at better frame rates, and it was just better overall. And they even used this particular game, Spider-Man 2, from Insomniac Games, as one of the standouts of this game will play better for you. They made a big deal about showing its fidelity and its frame rates. It looked great. But here's the problem. If I open up this case, there is a disc in here for Spider-Man 2 on PlayStation 5. PlayStation 5 Pro does not have a disc drive. So I could play my existing games, except there's no way to get this game on that console, at least from the technical presentation that we had from Mark Cerny. Now the reality is, you can play your disc games on the PS5 Pro. It's just you had to go digging in a blog post to find out that you need to buy the add-on disc drive separately. So exactly the same as the PS5 Slim is now, where you get the Slim console, and if you want the disc drive, it's an additional sort of magnetic screw-on add-on that you can add at another time. You have to do that with the PS5 Pro. So suddenly, to do exactly what Mark Cerny was telling me I had to do during that entire presentation, play my existing games at much better fidelity, to play this game on PS5 Pro, I am getting a surcharge of £100. Those disc drives are £100 here in the UK. So that is a £799 console to play this game that I can already play at 60 frames per second on my existing PlayStation 5. This is the Pro console. This is the absolute tippy-top cream of the crop. Why is not everything included? In this professional console, in this top-of-the-line PlayStation 5, why do I have to be charged extra to play my physical library, of which I have multiple games? Why is my PlayStation 5 Pro experience that bit more expensive than, say, my Super PlayStation Brothers podcast co-host Rudigs's experience? Why is his cheaper? Because he plays most things digitally. But that's not all. Behind where the camera is right now is a piece of furniture that I bought specifically to house my PlayStation 5. It also houses the Switch, it houses laptops, all the accessories, the PSVR 2, all of the games. It is a one-size-fits-all type idea, except for the cupboard that the PlayStation 5 sits in. That cupboard was designed and made specifically to house the PlayStation 5 in an upright manner and give it the best possible ventilation I could within my home setting. I literally went out and bought a specific piece of furniture for the PlayStation 5. Now the PS5 Pro is the exact same size as the launch model PS5 that I currently have. So it would fit in the exact same space that the current PS5 sits. Except this Pro console, this £799 console at this point, doesn't come with a vertical stand in the box. Whereas the launch model for £449 did. So suddenly this £699 Pro console is costing me, this physical gamer who has a specific piece of furniture made to house the PS5, is costing me £825. £825 for a home console to do what my current one does a little bit better. I'm now starting to see why people were of the mindset of build a PC. The problem is, even at that £825, you still cannot build a PC that performs equally to the PlayStation 5 Pro. You're still going to that £1,500 to £2,000 mark. It's not a cheap endeavor. And the bonus of something like the PlayStation 5 Pro is it's plug and play. So you plug it in, you turn it on, you start gaming. And you're meant to have this wonderful Pro experience at that point. And for £825, a Pro experience on par with something 2-ish times more expensive is pretty darn good value for money. Except that it isn't the full Pro experience. Because in the box with the PlayStation 5 Pro, you get one of these, a DualSense controller, and this is the standard DualSense. This is my launch model DualSense. It came with my console. Still works absolutely flawlessly to this day. I love it. It is what makes these consoles next generation, in my opinion. But you get this controller with the Pro console. When Sony have a Pro controller on the market that they have made themselves, that they market themselves, called the DualSense Edge. So it's this, but with flappy paddles on the back, swappable sticks, swappable triggers, swappable buttons, basically all of the Pro stuff you want, but it's not included with the Pro console. So this Pro console doesn't come with a stand, doesn't come with a disc drive so that I can play my existing games, comes with the basic controller, not the Pro controller for the Pro experience that this Pro console is trying to sell. So if I want to go out and have the full professional Pro PlayStation 5 experience, I am spending £699 on the console, £25 on the vertical stand, another £100 on the disc drive, and then another £209 on the Pro controller. That means that the PS5 Pro, if you want the full Pro experience, which is what is being sold to you by Sony right now, if you want that full Pro experience, it is going to cost you over £1,050. At that point, for £500 more, you can get a future-proofed PC. And the question becomes a little bit more difficult about if the PS5 Pro is value for money. But that PS5 Pro becomes even more of a challenge when you're talking about value for money when you look at what it offers. A big part of the presentation was going over this checkerboard upgraded visual processing that the PlayStation 5 Pro will do. The only way that you are going to see that checkerboard upgraded visual is on a 4K television. If you have a 4K television, like my one here, a Sony Bravia from 2018, a 4K television with a super processor within it, that processor is going to take any signal that is below 4K and already do that checkerboarding process to bring those visuals up to 4K. That means if I'm putting this game, Spider-Man 2, through the PlayStation 5 into my television at 60 frames per second, because this runs at 1080p at 60 frames per second, my television will take that signal and boost it to 4K automatically. And it's not just Sony televisions that do that. TCL televisions do that. LG televisions do that. Samsung televisions do that. Philips televisions, Toshiba televisions. Basically, any television on the planet that is fully 4K capable that you plug a PlayStation 5 into is going to uprate that image to 4K rather than the 1080, 1800, 1200, 1400, whatever it comes into the television at, it's going to upgrade it to 4K, making this whole checkerboarding process on the PlayStation 5 completely null and void. Because if you're putting that through a monitor with lesser resolution, it's not going to be doing the checkerboarding anyway because it's already running at that lower resolution. To make the argument even worse, even harder, in that technical presentation, Mark Cerny stated that over 3/4, over 75% of all PlayStation 5 players play on performance mode. What that means is they are after more frames per second. And whilst the PS5 Pro will give you that, as we've already covered, it's doing that at uprated graphics and doing a lot of other things besides. The reason for the stronger GPU, the reason for pushing further graphics according to that technical presentation, is because developers want it. But if you've got 3/4 of your player base not caring about the graphical fidelity that these developers are pushing for and wanting more of, why are you focusing your efforts there? If these developers were to take a step back, look at what their customers wanted. Take this, Spider-Man 2 for example. To run at 60 frames per second, it downgrades the visuals to 1080p. The reason it's doing that is it's incredibly visibly adept, and it's got ray tracing on no matter what mode. So if you're on fidelity or performance mode on this game, you've got ray tracing. If you took that ray tracing out, however, could you not hit 60 frames per second at, say, 1440p? You look at Ghost of Tsushima, it runs at 1800p at 60 frames per second blissfully. There's no ray tracing in that. And because you've got such a higher level image coming into the television, the chip in the television's upscaling to the 4K that then has to happen is much lesser, meaning you get a crisper, better, faster flowing game just from removing one thing that players don't notice. I've had ray tracing for 4 years at this point. It's been on the PlayStation 5 since day one, and I have tried to notice the differences that it makes to the games. And I don't. I notice when I'm pixel peeping after the fact. I notice when I'm making reviews and putting those visuals out there for all to see, but in-game, when I'm actually playing, when I'm engrossed in that world, I don't notice ray tracing. I notice if HDR isn't there. That high dynamic range needs to be implemented much better in many, many games. But ray tracing is unnoticeable. So surely, the claims that are on the box of the PlayStation 5 could be achieved if the developers just did their job properly and optimized for the platform that they're building for. The PS5 Pro can do 4K, 60 frames per second in some titles. There's word coming out that it's going to run some games at basically the same resolution as the PS5 to get the 60 frames per second. So, what's the point of it? I was excited during the technical presentation because everything Mark Cerny said were things that spoke to me, the hardcore PlayStation gamer. He was talking about giving me better visuals at higher frame rates. Two things I would love to see. He was talking about some DLSS type process where your frame rates are boosted artificially and your resolution is boosted artificially. Both things that have done absolute wonders on the PC side of things. If you look at FSR on the Asus ROG Ally X, for example, you can get games running on a handheld PC at over 100 frames per second. That is incredible. That sort of technology is wonderful. But I do beg the question of how much they realized the price was going to be a problem. Because the moment that price came on screen, in that last second of that technical presentation, all of the other good stuff that they had mentioned throughout was undone. Because at £699 without a vertical stand, without a Pro controller, without a disk drive, is already putting that at the top of most people's absolute stretch affordability. When you then add on all of the additional extras that actually make that console usable for the existing PlayStation player, which are the people it is aimed at, costing them over £1,000 to get everything, it's not even in the realms of attainable anymore. The choice is indefensible. Consoles are meant to be that entry point. And yes, a Pro console is meant to be that little bit more. Look at the PlayStation 4 Pro, look at the Xbox One X. Incredibly powerful devices. But the PlayStation 4 Pro came with everything in the box. It came with its stand, it came with a disk drive, it came with 2 terabytes of memory, it came with a better CPU and GPU, it ran better, it ran cooler, it looked incredible, and it was only £100 more than the base PlayStation 4. The PS5 Pro, at its entry price of $699, is over £200 more than the base PS5 at its $479. That's not adding on all of the extras. That's not buying all of the additional stuff that actually makes that console work. The PS5 Pro is a phenomenal bit of kit. It will play games better than we have seen in console gaming ever before. The power says that it will. The developers, the industry analysts, even the independent verificators say that it will, ignoring Sony's whole spiel. But I feel like they've priced themselves out of the market. I feel like this Pro console for the hardcore PlayStation gamer has been priced so aggressively high, so far out of that level of attainability, that even your hardcore players, people like myself who bought the PlayStation 4 Pro as soon as they could, will look at that PlayStation 5 Pro consistently and just say no. Because they can do so much more with that money otherwise. And they can get a very similar experience on the PS5. And if developers do their job properly and actually optimize their games, as we have seen with Astro Bot recently, you can get titles that will run on the base PlayStation 5 at 4K visuals and at 60 frames per second without needing a HDMI 2.1 television. The problem with the PlayStation 5 is its price, and price alone. Everything else about it, I think we can all agree, is wonderful. It's doing what developers want, it's doing what players want. It's, okay, same size as the base PlayStation 5, the original launch model, but that means you're not going to have to buy any more furniture or move things around to have it fit into your home. It just goes where it was. And you can't build a PC for the same price. You just can't. Not with comparative performance. But what you can do is price your customer base out of attaining said console. It's the same problem that the PSVR 2 had. When that dropped by £100 here in the UK for about a month and a half last year in 2023, it became the second best selling VR headset on the planet. It only trailed the MetaQuest 3 because it dropped its price by £100. If you drop the price of that console by £100, the added extras suddenly become much more palatable, or you can do without for a little while. But pricing it at that $699 starting price, bear in mind that's the starting price, it could go all the way up to over £1,000. Just doesn't feel good as a PlayStation fan, as a PlayStation player. I like to be at that bleeding edge, but like with folding phones, I suppose, those of us who would grow an industry have been priced out of said industry. And instead it's only the elite who can get hold of it. It doesn't help that the messaging in that event was terrible as well. They didn't mention that a disk drive was available during the presentation, just showed you a digital-only machine. Didn't help that they said you're not getting a DualSense Edge with this Pro console. Mentioned it in a blog post thereafter. Didn't mention PlayStation VR 2 at all. It took CNET asking in an interview after the fact, say, yeah, this will boost VR quite drastically. Poor messaging, poor pricing, for what is otherwise a decent bit of kit. But if your fan base can't afford it, PlayStation, how good is it in reality? I'd like to thank you all very much for tuning in. This video is a thoughts video after a week stewing on the information, reading through the information from PlayStation directly, a little bit from places like Digital Foundry, IGN, and a few others. But otherwise, everything within this video is my own opinion, my own thoughts on the matter. It's been an unscripted video, so sorry if I've rambled and waffled a little bit, but I thought it was important to get some raw feelings into this one. But either way, let me know your thoughts on the PS5 Pro in the comments section below. And in the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, I think this one will also be of interest to you. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Doragon. You can find me on Threads or in the Discord in the description below. And until next time, have yourselves a fantastic day and take care.